Hello class, this is Mr. Mormon. This is your unit test review for unit number 3 on cells, the microscope, and characteristics of life. Let's start with the characteristics of life. All living things are made of cells. They contain similar chemicals like DNA, protein, carbohydrates, and lipids. They use energy, they grow, they respond to their surroundings, and they reproduce. Living things have certain needs. They all need energy, water, and living space. Water is the most abundant compound in all living things. Cytoplasm is mostly water, so is blood. If you were able to wring out all of the water in a human, you'd find that about 70% of our mass is made up of water. In this unit, we learned 8 life processes. We can remember these with the mnemonic TENGRRRS. The first is transport. This is the movement of materials into and out of the cell. It's also the movement of materials around a multicellular organism. Excretion is the removal of liquid and gaseous wastes of metabolism. When you breathe out, you are excreting carbon dioxide, for example. Nutrition, this is obtaining food, either autotrophically, by making food, that's what plants do, or heterotrophs, which need to eat. Breaking it down, that's digestion, and then absorbing the useful nutrients. Living things grow as a process. This means getting bigger. They grow by getting more cells, mitosis. Reproduction means making new members. Now this process is different than all the others because it's not necessary for the survival of the individual. It is, however, necessary for the survival of the species. Next comes respiration. Now here we're not talking about breathing. Respiration, cellular respiration, is releasing energy from food or glucose. Usually this requires oxygen. Then there's regulation. This is keeping everything in balance or in control. Living things will respond to changes in their environment by making different changes, keeping everything balanced and in control. Another word we've used here is homeostasis. Synthesis is a chemical reaction which uses the digested parts of food and puts them back together to make new materials the cell needs. To digest is to break down molecules into smaller pieces. Synthesis is the opposite of that, putting small molecules together to make larger molecules. Now back to homeostasis. This means maintaining stable internal conditions. Everything needs to be kept at the proper level. Body temperature, blood glucose, blood oxygen. These are all things that your body is constantly monitoring and keeping at a proper level. We recently talked a lot about classification. The reason we classify things is to make them easier to study. It organizes them and allows us to compare and contrast. Living things are classified or put into groups based on observable physical characteristics. Remember what we did in class when we were breaking things into groups. Saying something like asking, does the organism fly, is not a good classification, a good thing to use for classification. Instead, you could use something like, does it have wings? That's an observable physical characteristic. The science of classification is called taxonomy, and the system of binomial nomenclature, that was the two-name naming system, was invented by Carolus Linnaeus. We often call it the Linnaean system. There are 7 levels of classification in the Linnaean system: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. The largest or broadest level is the kingdom level up the top, and it has the greatest number of different types of organisms. The smallest, most specific level is species, and here the organisms would have the most similarities. To remember the levels of classification in order, remember this silly mnemonic: King Philip's class ordered 4 giant sandwiches. We talked about scientific names in class. An organism's scientific name has 2 parts. That's why the system is called binomial nomenclature, a two-name naming system. It is the organism's genus and species level. The genus is capitalized and the species is not. They should be written in italics or underlined if you're writing them by hand. Here are some examples. The human is Homo sapien. Wolf, coyote, and dog all belong to the genus Canis because they're all canines. They're dog-like, but each is a different species, so they have a different species name. The wolf is Canis lupus, coyote Canis latrans, and the dog Canis familiaris. You should know some of the basic characteristics of the six kingdoms. The two bacteria kingdoms, of course, are made up of bacteria. They're single-celled organisms. They have a cell wall, but there's no nucleus. The DNA just floats around inside the cytoplasm. The archaebacteria are the ancient bacteria and are like the first things that evolved on Earth. They're often found in very harsh environments like hot springs filled with toxic chemicals that most things couldn't live in, and the deep sea hydrothermal vents, which are really, really hot. Then there's the protist kingdom. These are mostly single-celled organisms. They do have a nucleus. Some are plant-like, some are animal-like. We looked at the amoeba and the paramecium in class. Those were examples of protists. Algae is also a protist. Then there are fungi. These are multicellular. They might look like plants if you think of mushrooms, but they do not have chloroplasts. They do not do photosynthesis. They are heterotrophs, living on the energy of the material that they're growing on, a dead log, for example, or something like that. This would include, fungi includes yeast, molds, mildews, and mushrooms. Then there's the plant kingdom. These are multicellular. They're autotrophic, meaning they contain chloroplasts and make their own food by photosynthesis. And then there's the kingdom we belong to, the animal kingdom. They are multicellular, they're heterotrophs, which mean that they need to eat. And they're going to be eating plants or other animals. We studied all the different parts of the cell. Why don't you pause the video at this point and see if you could fill in this table. These are the correct answers. How about labeling cells? Could you label the parts of this typical animal and plant cell? There are the answers. There's three main differences between plant and animal cells. Can you think of them? One, plant cells have a cell wall. Animal cells do not. Plant cells also have those green chloroplasts for doing photosynthesis. Of course, animal cells don't have that. And plant cells have large water vacuoles. Animal cells have vacuoles, but not the large water vacuoles like plant cells have. We also learned about ribosomes. Ribosomes are very small organelles. They float in the cytoplasm or are attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, making it rough endoplasmic reticulum. They make proteins from the instructions on the DNA in the nucleus. Mitochondria is another organelle that you need to know. These organelles are the powerhouse of the cell. Remember, mighty mitochondria. They take in glucose and oxygen and release energy for the cell to use. This is called cellular respiration. They are rod or bean shaped with a folded membrane inside, like you see in the diagram here. Now remember, all of these organelles, they are parts of a cell, and they act like the organs in a multicellular organism. They do all of the life processes keeping the cell alive. They all work together to keep the cell alive and do the life processes. We then learned about the microscope. The microscope does these three things to an image. It increases magnification, making things look larger. It increases resolution, making them look sharper. And it reverses the image, making it look upside down and backwards. We know that we can use the microscope to estimate the size of microscopic organisms. We did this in class many times. To do this, we had to measure the field of view with a thin, clear ruler or a grid slide. This gives a measurement in millimeters that you can compare to. When you're putting things under the microscope, once you know the size of the field of view, you can estimate their size in millimeters. We also measured in microns or micrometers. Remember that 1 millimeter equals 1,000 microns. We next learned about levels of organization. These are the levels of organization from smallest to biggest. Cells are grouped into tissues, or tissues, several different kinds of tissues working together makes an organ. A bunch of organs make up an organ system, and if you put all the organ systems together, you have a complete organism. Tissues, remember, is a group of similar cells, all working together to do a job. We could talk about muscle tissue, bone tissue, brain tissue. Even blood is considered a tissue because it's made up of many different kinds of cells. Okay, I think that's enough of an overview of the things that we have done in this unit. Please study this stuff. You'll have a review sheet in class tomorrow, and we'll do some more review in class tomorrow before the test. Be ready to ask me any questions that you have.